we are going to talk about Hyper-V, which is actually just Microsoft's version of a hypervisor. So this is actually just Microsoft. And so this is really just a hypervisor. A hypervisor is really just a hardware virtualization technique. However you spell that. Not very good at spelling anyways. So what it does is, multiple guest operating systems, they can run on a single host or a physical system at a time. So that's all that really means. And then those guest operating systems, they share the hardware of the host. So that's what that virtualization does. This is also known as a virtual machine manager. So whenever you get your hypervisor or Hyper-V put onto your machine, you will go into your virtual machine manager, and then that is where you will manage all your virtual machines that you install onto your server. So more than just words, I'm going to draw you pretty pictures, so this might make a little more sense. They're not going to be pretty pictures. So let's say we've got a server here. Server A. And this is obviously your physical or your host machine. And so your host machine it's got your physical hardware components. So, it's going to have RAM. And let's say it's got 16 gigabytes of RAM. And so it's also going to have, say, a hard drive. And it's got a 1 terabyte hard drive on it. I'll put some numbers with it so it makes a little sense here in a little bit. And so Hyper-V is also known as your virtual machine manager. We're shortening that a little bit. Okay, so you install Hyper-V on your machine, and then you put a VM on it. I'll just draw a little box to say that that's our VM. And what you do when you install Hyper-V onto a server, it's almost like Hyper-V goes and rents out some apartment space on your server. So it's like it rents a little apartment down here. So here's Hyper-V. It's renting some space down there. And that's all it really does, is it just kind of rents that little corner. And then when you say, hey, I want to put a virtual machine on here, and I want to install Windows 8, that should be an 8, Windows 8 on here, then Hyper-V, that virtual machine manager, goes to work and says, okay, let's borrow some hardware. And so then we need to figure out how much RAM Windows 8 is going to need to work. So let's borrow 4 gigabytes of RAM and allocate that much. And how much hard drive space are we going to need to allocate? So let's take 20 gigabytes of hard drive space. So that's where it comes into play. And your Hyper-V starts really working for you. Is when you actually start putting the virtual machines on the system. Otherwise, it just sits there and does nothing and just takes up that little bit of space. So this over here is kind of your big picture of that little spot there. So that's just a very terrible drawing of what Hyper-V is. We will actually be installing Hyper-V here momentarily so you can see how it goes on the machine, and then we will be installing some virtual machines and see how that actually works, and actually get into the virtual machine manager and work with that as well. We are now going to install Hyper-V on our server 2012. When you start up your computer, your server manager should automatically open for you. If it does not and your desktop looks like this, then your server manager is down in the left corner. Looks like that right there. Click on it and it'll open for you. There's a couple of different ways, just pretty obvious in your server manager, to get to the add roles and features. One is just under this manage, and it's right there, add roles and features. Or the really obvious one is just right here, smack in the middle of the screen, the big add roles and features in your quick start. So you can just click that and the add roles and features wizard will pop up for you. The before you begin screen, we can just click next through it. I usually just skip it. We are doing a role-based or feature-based installation as the installation type, so click next there. Right now we only have one server that we are operating, so that is the only one showing up. It is possible to have multiple servers show up in that window, so for now click next. Server roles, this is where we choose Hyper-V. If you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see it right there. And whenever you click in the box, you'll get a pop-up window here that tells you everything that you're going to be installing. Don't make any changes to this, just click on Add Features. It'll take just a second for it to kind of figure out what it's wanting to do, and then you'll just click Next. After this, it takes you to the features. Here we're not going to add any other features. At some point, it's something else that you could do, is add other features. We just click Next again. And then this window tells you a little bit about Hyper-V and things to note about Hyper-V. If you want to take a second to read that, you can. I've read it, so I'm going to just click Next through that. Virtual switches. I just click Next through this. We will not go into migration at all at this point in time, so just click Next through this. The default stores is where everything, your virtual hard disks and your configurations are going to be stored. I leave it at the default places. If you have maybe 2 different hard drives in your computer and want something stored in a different place, you can change that if you want. That's completely up to you. I just click Next through this. The last page is just a confirmation of what you're installing and all the little stuff underneath it. And if you were doing something, Hyper-V plus other stuff, which you can install a whole bunch of stuff if you want, it'd probably take a while, but you don't have to do one thing at a time, then it would list a whole lot more here. Then all you have to do now is just click Install and it will go. Once it gets going, then you are able, it'll pop up here in just a second and it will allow you to actually close this window and you're able to keep working. Up here on the top right, there's a little flag that has notifications, and you'll see there's one there, and I click on it and it's installing a feature, and it'll let you know when you're done. There'll be something else that'll pop up there, and once that's done, then it'll tell you whether or not you need to restart your computer once the feature's installed. There it goes. There's a little yellow warning sign. So if I click on it now, then it tells me that a restart is pending on, that's actually my computer name, something you should probably change, maybe something you could remember better. But it's telling me I must restart the server to finish, and you can double click, or you can click on it, takes you back. You must restart the server to finish the installation. So now I'm going to restart the server, and then when I come back, we'll see that we have Hyper-V. Okay, I have restarted my computer, and if you look over to the left, you will now see that Hyper-V is here. So in order to get to my virtual machine manager, or my Hyper-V manager, you click on Tools up here, and now you see Hyper-V Manager. You can click on that, and voila, we have the Hyper-V Manager. And this is where you will go anytime you need to add a virtual machine or open a virtual machine or do anything virtually in your server. So this over here on the left shows your Hyper-V manager, and then this is the server, which we should really rename our server. If you had renamed your server, it would say whatever cool name you had for your server. And then if you had virtual machines, which we will soon, they would be listed here in the middle underneath the name, and then all kinds of cool stuff there. We'll get to that. And then over here on the right, you've got your server name at the top, and then stuff down here. So if you click New, then we can start installing virtual machines. The Virtual Switch Manager, this you will get into a lot, and I will do a whole separate video on this when we get into some of the networking stuff, and the rest of the stuff I don't use a lot. You can stop and do things with these buttons, but a lot of times when you're messing with your virtual machines, you can do things just by right-clicking on them over here. That's really it. There's not a lot to it right now because there's not any virtual machines in it. Once you get a virtual machine in it, there's a lot more you can do. So the next step is to actually install a virtual machine.